I could feel the vibration of the electric razor rattling my teeth. But what hurt wasn't the loss of my hair, it was the metal blade scraping directly over the fresh, pink surgical staples holding the side of my skull together. I tried to scream, "Stop, you're going to kill me," but the sergeant just shoved my face harder into the armrest, laughing that he was fixing me. I was seconds away from a brain hemorrhage. I closed my eyes, waiting to die right there in that chair. And then, the door splintered open. The room went deathly silent. I looked up through my tears and saw the two-star general standing in the doorway. He didn't look angry. He looked terrified. He looked at the sergeant, then he looked at the blood on the razor, and then he fell to his knees in front of me. He whispered, "Colonel, please tell me they didn't touch the scar." The sergeant's smile vanished. He didn't know he had just assaulted his new commanding officer. He didn't know he had just signed his own death warrant. There are people watching this right now who would have stood there and laughed just like those soldiers. Don't be one of them. If you have the courage to stand against bullies, prove it. Tap that like button right now. Do not scroll past injustice. To understand why I let this happen, you have to understand the hell I had just walked out of. 45 minutes before the razor touched my skin, I was sitting on a rusted metal bench outside Barracks B, looking like a shadow of the woman I used to be. If you walked past me that morning, you wouldn't have seen a colonel with 15 years of combat experience, a silver star, and a reputation for tactical brilliance. You would have seen a ghost. I was drowning in an oversized gray hoodie, my hands buried deep in my pockets to hide the violent tremors shaking my fingers, and a thick black wool beanie pulled down low to cover the shame of my patchy, chemical-burned hair. My doctors had begged me not to come back yet. They looked at my scans and told me, "Sarah, your brain is still swelling. One hard knock could kill you." But I couldn't stay in that hospital bed for another day. I needed to be here. I needed to see my unit. But the moment I walked through the gates, the world started to tilt. The vertigo hit me like a sledgehammer to the temple. I felt the ground swaying beneath my feet like the deck of a ship in a storm. I just needed 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to close my eyes, let the nausea pass, and pretend I wasn't fighting a war inside my own body. I was fragile. Not weak, fragile. Like a cracked glass vase waiting for the slightest vibration to shatter it completely. That's when I heard the boots. Heavy. Aggressive. The unmistakable sound of a predator marching on pavement. It was Sergeant Miller. I didn't know his name then, but I knew his type instantly. He was the kind of man who peaked in basic training and got off on making people feel small. He saw a figure slumped on a bench in civilian clothes, and he didn't see a human being in medical distress. He didn't see an officer. He saw prey. He saw a target. To his twisted mind, I was just a lazy, hungover new recruit trying to hide from morning inspection. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't give a verbal warning. He launched his combat boot into the metal leg of the bench with everything he had. Clang. The sound wasn't the problem. It was the vibration. The shockwave traveled up the metal, shot through my spine, and exploded inside my skull. It felt like someone had driven an ice pick straight into my fresh surgical incision. My vision went white. The pain was blinding, white-hot, and instant. I gasped, clutching my head with both hands, trying to keep my brain from splitting open, trying to keep the bile from rising in my throat. "Wake up, maggot." His voice was a drill sergeant's bark, loud enough to wake the dead, designed to terrify. "You think this is a hotel? You think you can sleep off a bender on my base while my men are working?" I tried to focus on his face, but he was just a blur of anger and camouflage. The sunlight hurt my eyes. I tried to pull rank. I tried to summon the voice that had commanded battalions. I tried to say, "Soldier, stand down immediately. I am Colonel Sarah Vance, your new commanding officer." But the high-dose anti-seizure medication I was on made my tongue feel like it was 3 sizes too big for my mouth. My words didn't come out crisp and commanding. They came out slurred. Slow. Broken. I'm call. Nah. VVVV. Miller grinned. It was a cruel, twisted smile that sent a chill colder than the wind down my back. He looked back at his squad and laughed. Listen to that. She's so wasted she can't even speak English. Looks like we got ourselves a drunk, boys. And you know what we do with trash that disrespects our uniform. Before I could stammer out another syllable, his hand shot out like a viper. He grabbed the wool of my beanie and ripped it from my head with a vicious jerk. The cold morning air hit my scalp instantly, but that was nothing compared to the burn of humiliation. I wasn't just bald. I was unfinished. My hair wasn't styled, it was destroyed. It grew in jagged, pathetic clumps of fuzz, fighting for space amidst red, irritated skin and the angry, pink track marks of radiation burns. I looked like a monster. I looked like something that was dying. For a split second, I expected silence. I expected human decency. I expected them to see the ravages of chemotherapy and back off. Instead, the air erupted with laughter. It wasn't nervous laughter. It was deep, mocking, belly laughter. The squad pointed at me like I was a sideshow freak. Miller stepped closer, his face twisting in disgust, performing for his audience. Jesus, he sneered, recoiling as if I were contagious. Look at this mess. You look like a diseased rat that crawled out of a sewer. We can't have a biological hazard like you walking around spreading lice to my men. The shame burned hotter than the fever I was fighting, but deep in my gut, the soldier finally woke up. The slur in my voice faded just enough for the steel to come through. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I locked eyes with him and lowered my voice to a lethal whisper. Sergeant, I said, my breath rattling in my chest. If you lay a hand on me, you will end your career. You will be buried under the jail. He paused. Then he threw his head back and laughed even harder. Did you hear that, boys? The drunk thinks she's got pull. She thinks she's somebody. He leaned in close, his spit hitting my face. You're delusional, sweetheart. You're nothing but a health code violation. He snapped his fingers. Grab her. Get her to the chair. We're shaving this disaster off before she infects the whole barracks. Two of his biggest privates stepped forward. They grabbed my arms. My instinct, honed by 15 years of hand-to-hand combat training, screamed at me to fight. I knew exactly how to break the hold. I knew how to snap the wrist of the man on my left and drive my elbow into the throat of the man on my right. It was muscle memory. But I froze. I realized with terrifying clarity that if I fought back, if I strained my neck, if I spiked my blood pressure, if I took one blow to the head, the intracranial pressure would burst the dissolvable stitches holding my skull together. A single violent movement wouldn't just hurt, it would cause a massive hemorrhage. I would be dead before I hit the pavement. So I had to do the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I had to go limp. I had to swallow my pride, choke down my rage, and let them drag me across the asphalt like a sack of garbage. I had to submit to the abuse just to stay alive long enough to destroy them. Imagine being punished for surviving cancer. Imagine being tortured for surviving a war. It makes my blood boil. If you support our troops and hate bullies, hit that subscribe button. Show them that the world is watching. The smell hit me first, acrid bleach, stale water, and the metallic tang of old rust. They kicked the bathroom door open and shoved me into the single, cracked vinyl barber chair in the corner. My head whipped back against the headrest, and for a terrifying second, the room spun so violently I thought I was going to black out. Hold her still, Miller barked. Two pairs of hands clamped onto my shoulders like vices, pinning me down. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to regulate my breathing, trying to lower the pressure building inside my skull. Then came the sound. The electric razor roared to life right next to my ear. It sounded like a chainsaw in the small, tiled room. I opened my eyes just in time to see Miller pop the plastic safety guard off the clippers and toss it into the sink. He wasn't going to trim my hair. He was going to scrape me raw. "Let's see what's under all that fuzz," he muttered, grinning. He didn't start gently. He jammed the bare, vibrating metal teeth straight into the nape of my neck. It felt like fire. He dragged it upward with zero finesse, tearing through the patches of hair and scraping the sensitive, chemotherapy-thin skin. I gritted my teeth, locking my jaw so tight I thought a tooth might crack. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. But then he moved to the right side. "Miller, wait," I tried to warn him, my voice barely a rasp. He didn't listen. He drove the clippers hard over my right temple, and the metal teeth caught on the jagged ridge of the surgical staples that were still embedded in my flesh. The pain wasn't just physical, it was electric. A blinding flash of white light exploded behind my eyelids. It felt like he had hooked a car battery directly to my brainstem. The razor skipped over the metal staples with a sickening screech, ripping the scabs open. "Sarge, stop." It was one of the younger privates, a kid who looked like he hadn't started shaving yet. He was pointing at the cape around my neck. "Look at the cut. She's bleeding." That's not normal blood, Sarge." I could feel it. A warm, wet trickling sensation running down behind my ear, soaking into the collar of my hoodie. Miller pulled the razor back for a second, looking at the blood smeared on the metal teeth. He shrugged, wiping the blade on his pant leg. "Relax, kid. She's tough. A little Nick builds character. She can take it." He raised the razor again. The room began to narrow. My peripheral vision started to go dark. I recognized the signs immediately. The metallic taste in my mouth, the rhythmic thumping in my ears. I was going into shock. My brain was swelling. A seizure was seconds away. "Please," I prayed silently, staring at the door. I wasn't praying for God. I wasn't praying for mercy. I was praying for General Sterling. "Get here now. If you don't walk through that door in the next 10 seconds, I'm going to die in this chair." And then, the door exploded. It didn't just open. It was kicked with such ferocity that the handle punched a hole in the plaster wall behind it. The sound was like a gunshot, shattering the suffocating atmosphere of the bathroom instantly. General Sterling stood in the frame, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his brow. He had been running. He looked wild, frantic, scanning the room until his eyes locked onto me. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush lungs. Miller froze, the buzzing razor hovering inches from my bleeding scalp. The privates holding me down loosened their grip, sensing a shift in the universe they couldn't quite understand yet. I watched the general's face change. I expected him to start screaming, to start throwing punches. But he didn't. As he looked at the blood trickling down my neck and the exposed, stapled flesh of my skull, his expression crumbled into pure, unadulterated horror. He didn't look like a commanding officer in that moment. He looked like a man watching his own child bleed. He walked past Miller as if he didn't exist. He fell to his knees on the dirty tiled floor right in front of my chair. His hands, usually steady enough to sign death warrants, were trembling as he reached out, hovering over my injury, afraid to touch it. "Colonel," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Sarah, please tell me they didn't touch the graft." The air left the room. I heard the soldier behind me gasp. Miller's jaw went slack. The word hung in the air between us, echoing off the tiles. "Colonel. Not private. Not maggot. Colonel." Miller tried to salvage it. He tried to speak, his voice trembling with a pathetic mix of arrogance and confusion. "Sir. She was out of uniform. We were just cleaning up the—" "Shut up," the general said. He didn't yell it. He said it with a cold, deadly calm that was infinitely more terrifying than a scream. He stood up slowly, turning to face Miller. He pointed a shaking finger at the jagged, bleeding line the razor had carved into my head. "Do you know what that is, Sergeant?" the general asked softly. "You think that's bad hygiene? You think that's ugly?" Miller couldn't answer. He was paralyzed. "That scar," the general continued, his voice rising, vibrating with fury, "is where they removed the shrapnel from a Type 97 grenade. A grenade she dove on top of. A grenade that was meant for me." He stepped into Miller's personal space, towering over him. We were in Fallujah. She pushed me into a trench and took the blast with her own body. This woman lost half her skull keeping me alive. And you just decided to reopen the wound. The realization hit Miller like a physical blow. I watched the color drain out of his face so fast he looked like a corpse. His eyes darted from the general's stars to my bleeding head, finally connecting the dots. He hadn't just bullied a sick recruit. He had tortured a war hero. He had assaulted a colonel. He had desecrated the savior of his own general. His fingers went numb. The electric razor slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a loud, hollow clatter. The sound signaled the end of his life as he knew it. I placed my hands on the armrests and pushed myself up. The dizziness that had crippled me on the bench was gone, replaced by a surge of adrenaline so potent it felt like ice water in my veins. I wiped the trickle of blood from my neck with the back of my hand, looked at the red smear on my skin, and then looked at Miller. The dynamic in the room didn't just shift, it inverted. I wasn't a sick woman in a hoodie anymore. I was his superior officer, and he knew it. I took a step toward him. He flinched. The man who had been barking orders and laughing 5 minutes ago was now shaking so violently that his knees were knocking together. Tears were cutting clean tracks through the dust on his face. He looked pathetic. He looked small. I stepped into his personal space, close enough to smell the fear on him. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. "Look at me, Sergeant," I commanded. He forced his eyes up to meet mine, terrified of what he saw. "You said you wanted to teach me a lesson about hygiene," I whispered, my voice echoing off the cold tiles. "So it's only fair I return the favor. I'm going to teach you a lesson about the chain of command." General Sterling didn't wait for another second. He barked a single word toward the doorway, "MPs." 2 military police officers marched in, handcuffs already drawn. They didn't treat Miller and his squad like soldiers, they treated them like criminals. They slammed them against the wall. But before the cuffs clicked shut, the general stepped forward. "You are a disgrace to this uniform," Sterling spat. He reached out to Miller's chest and ripped the Velcro rank patch right off his uniform. The sound of that tearing fabric was louder than the razor had been. He threw the sergeant's stripes on the wet floor. "You are stripped of rank effective immediately, Private. You will face court-martial for assault on a superior officer, conduct unbecoming, and gross insubordination." As the MPs began to drag them out, I held up a hand. "Wait." They stopped. Miller looked back at me, desperate, hoping for mercy. "Before you drag them to the brig," I said, my voice dead calm. "They have some cleaning to do. My barracks bathroom is filthy. I want it spotless." I pointed to the sink where Miller had tossed a dirty toothbrush earlier. "And Private Miller, you're going to use that for every single latrine in this building." I watched the light leave his eyes. He slumped in the MP's grip, broken. I didn't watch them leave. I turned to the mirror. I looked at my reflection, the pale skin, the blood, the jagged haircut, and the ugly, twisting scar that proved I had survived hell. I didn't pull my beanie back on. I didn't hide it. I squared my shoulders, nodded to the general, and we walked out of that bathroom side by side. I walked through the gathered crowd of soldiers outside with my head held high, wearing my scars like the medals they were. They got exactly what they deserved. But thousands of bullies get away with it every day. If you're glad justice was served in this story, comment, and "No mercy" below. Share this story so every bully knows. You never know who you're messing with.